Welcome, I'm Ike, and this is Draw Process, where I draw comic book pages and process about my development. Last week was the cover of my comic, First Sun and Sword Episode 2, and this week is Back to Interiors with page 50. Here we go. It's about 2 years that I've been doing this Draw Process series where basically a new comic page every week and a new video. And it's always in this format. I speed up, time-lapse, the drawing of the page, I make comments on the techniques, I share about my process, and I talk about my development as an artist and the struggles and questions and thoughts that arise. It's almost part podcast and part time-lapse instructional, I guess you would say. And sometimes I lean towards instructional, pointing out all the decisions I'm making. And that also helps me because I reflect on all these decisions I'm making. I learn how to talk about what I do, reflect on what I do. But the other helps me too, which is opening up, talking about my perspective and thoughts on things, what I'm processing. The time-lapse, just so you know, is varying in its speed. The initial pencils, because they're so hard to see, I have sped those up more than the other parts so that you're not too bored doing that. So it'll quickly get to this part where the pencils are more visible, and now the speed is closer to 7 times speed, maybe 6. And yeah, it's strange how I share about my process, how I think about my practice, and try to share my thoughts because I don't really prepare. I just sort of see what comes out. And even now, I wanted to prepare. It struck me that I wanted to prepare myself and spend just 10 minutes focused on thinking about what I will say today, what is going on for me that I can talk about. And I could not make it 10 minutes without texts I needed to reply to and things like that. And that's all the time I have, unless I just put this off another day, tomorrow being the very last day I could get this done. This is the time I need to record. And so in this time-limited way, I'm just, told it's time. I'm forced. It's time to act. It's time to perform. Just go for it. And hopefully you have enough riches of self to let them out, to perform. And sometimes it's like that with drawing the pages. I just know that I've got to start drawing and let the performance be good enough. Trust that there's enough there to do it. And that definitely has me thinking about just that in general. This, what would it mean to slow down, to think about things more slowly, more deeply, with no pressure, no need to perform, not pressured to perform. And and this applies to the drawing too, because it's to let my words, my speech, my written word, my lines that I lay down to be an act, to be action from a place of groundedness, you could say. I'm not sure how this weaves in, but it makes me think of another thing that I've been thinking about. The way that I will get an idea of what image I want to convey in a panel and in the page, all the images. And when I lay down rough pencils, I start with that and then I refine it into the more detailed pencils. To jump right in with the detailed pencils seems ill-advised because I'm doing that on this panel right here on the screen. I have the picture in my mind. I just start drawing it. I'm thinking I'll show his hand on his waist. And then I realize, well, let's put both of them there. Well, I need to center these. They're not looking right. I'm going to have to erase it and start it all over again and line them up using a rough drawing that just gets the basic symmetry, the basic shapes in position, and then build on it. That's an example of why the rough drawing seems important. And yet, when I think about that, it would seem that the best artists, the most seasoned and wise artists, that their rough drawing would be very personal. They wouldn't be following a particular method unless they've made it their own fully. It is a love letter to themselves. It is specifically what they need to lay down roughly. So they have an idea. It's a rough idea. They're only going to lay down the lines that they need to refine the idea. And it would be the same for an author of written word. They're going to, their way of building out the text and note-taking should be unique to them if they're fully developed. And it makes me think about how well I'm living up to that ideal. Am I working towards an authentic way of communicating to myself, of building my ideas from the roughs to the finished pencils? And again, for me, finished is not necessarily like perfectly fine lines because I'm going to ink off of these rough pencils. So it never really gets in a finished form, but just from the rough to final pencils. And I'm looking at myself pencil this and I'm thinking, is this the way to do it? And many times it feels good. This particular page maybe was done in not the best way, this large panel at the bottom, because although in my roughs, which were very light and hard to see, I had worked out a basic positioning of the figures. I then constructed all of the background before I did the figures. And that was a mistake for me, because this is not like animation or something where I need to turn in, the backgrounds and then do figures separately. The image that I'm trying to bring to life is of the figures and the background, all is one. There's no differentiation really between the figures and the background. It's all one image. That seems more authentic than to build your background, place in your figures. For me, there's no separation. And in some way that applies to your human forms and then their clothing. It's all one image. Now you may want to construct your person's flesh, and bone underneath so that you know that your forms are good before you apply clothing. That's different than what I'm saying. But in this case, you'll see I had to erase some of these pencils of the background to get my figures in. I think I should go ahead, what I normally do is go ahead and put in my figures and then the background around them. Because I basically knew where the background should be. I could have drawn that last, instead of drawing things that you won't see. I also find it particularly challenging or odd in a way when I have to draw just a static image. To just draw figures standing there doing nothing has become harder to me than drawing them doing things. I've gotten so used to drawing people in the middle of actions, walking, sitting, whatever, and now to just have them stand statically in the frame, which I think is good for the story. It's kind of strange to do that and see like, okay, does this body look alive in the way that I would otherwise make it? And I think back to the penciling, this was kind of a backwards way of constructing this panel, and I knew it as I did it that I had gotten ahead of myself, and was thinking the same thing. I even thought about redoing the page just to do it in the correct fashion. Not that I was unhappy with how the image looked so much, just to feel what doing it this better way would feel like. I didn't bother with it though, because it worked. There's a way that, okay, we could say I'm drawing and constructing things in order to clarify the vision I have for this image. I have an image in mind, or at least a vision of an image, a kind of inspiration of an image. I'm going to start drawing, trying to convey that, trying to refine it. And there might be some structural drawing, such as the form of the human figure, to help me get to a more refined final, statement, final, stronger image that's conveyed, more clear. But like I was saying, that's sketching for myself towards the ends I have in mind. The goal being this final image. What sketching do I need for myself, uniquely for me, to get to the final thing? But it's interesting because there's a way that your process will affect the outcome. Just like I was saying, where I drew the background first here in this last panel and then threw in the figures, it has an effect on the final image, just how it reads, just how it feels. In very subtle ways, perhaps, but it does. And so, as you look at your process, from whether you start in roughs and then go to digital and ink digitally, or pencil digitally and then go back to ink and physically, however, and every little detail of how you accomplish that will affect the look and feel of the final product. And you will come to look at your final idea. This is what I'm trying to get across, that the final image is your final idea. It's your act. As if you were speaking and you were thinking things through to yourself before you spoke and then you said it. That's what the art on the page is. It's my final speech, what I said. But it is informed by my process, how I think about it, how I construct it and sketch and take notes to help myself along here to the final image. And then you look at that final, creative act, the thing you said, and I think the right thing to do, this is kind of what I'm getting to, the right thing to do is to look at that with curiosity. Don't see it as you did it. Like it's very tempting, to attach your ego to it and say, look, I suck, or look how good I am. Or this is what I did. This is me, because it's not you. It was what came out from your inner process and outer. When we're talking about the things you actually did on the page to get to the final art. So you should approach it with curiosity. What just came out of me? How did the process I engaged in get to this final result? I could be curious about that. and know that it could be different next time, and there's a different way I could do it. And what are there things I like and don't like, and how do I figure out where that came from? What part in this process, what thing I do, somehow informed and led to that piece of the outcome that speaks to me, that feels like I want more of that. And that way you can get more of that. You can move more that direction. So you're really in dialogue with your finished piece and your process as you continue forward, and that makes it quite fun, quite exciting. Is what will come out of you, what will be created that's not you. This is not navel gazing. This is not narcissistic, just to look at yourself in the mirror. It's a creative act, something that's not you. And you get to look at it and see, what it says about you, yes, but also what it is, what you've created, and how did it get to there, and what pieces were involved. It's a surprise. The end result is a surprise to you. And be curious, because you don't understand it. And high skill in someone's draftsmanship, high knowledge in their drawing, and a really wonderful finished product, that doesn't mean they understand themselves. They have somehow developed a practice or stumbled on a practice that led to that end result, and they don't necessarily understand how they do it, and they're not necessarily self-aware in that way, able to change it, able to adjust it over time. That's the kind of how an artist that changes their style over time is rather interesting than someone that only continues in one direction, because they may be engaged in a sort of dialogue with what the process is telling them. And again, that's what makes it exciting and fun and interesting. What makes creating interesting. We are in a world full of images, full of facts and ideas, speech, and yet very little of it is creative acts. Very little of it, especially, these days with, AI and robots and stuff. These are not creative acts. It's words and facts and so on. And there's so many images that we see and that are out there, and if you think of those things, it could be disheartening. You would think, well, what's the point in creating more images? What's the point in speaking? And I look around and I see, again, a whole lot of images and a whole lot of words, but not much speech, not much communication, not much acts. Really not that many. I don't want to go down in a negative path here, but this kind of certain homogeneity that we see now, and a way even individual creatives will fall into trying to create according to an algorithm, or what's expected, what they think they should do based on what's out there, and this is kind of mimicking, artists mimicking the robots or something. But it can be very disheartening if you think of it that way. But then to have this perspective, it's the opposite. That this is the creative act. This is what becomes interesting to engage in and learn from. Kind of like if you wanted to explore your own psyche and learn about yourself, you can't do that by sitting and doing nothing. You have to talk, on the couch. That's just one example. But you lay down and you talk on the couch and you see what comes out of you. And then you get to learn. You get to be surprised by what comes out of you. It's in the act that we end up revealing something we didn't know. What's true about us. So I would like to ever be becoming. I want to continue to engage in the creative act and uncover, the depths of things in myself. And that's what's fun. And that's the process. And that's why I talk about speed again, voicing it slightly differently here. That's why I want to be fast and efficient, is not only to get the story out more quickly, but to let my act of creating, the process, the become more and more an act. Not a carefully crafted novel, but statements spoken in the moment. And for my art to be like that it's communicating in the moment. It's an act. It's the lines are laid down to express what I'm attempting to express. They're an attempt that's captured in this medium, outside of time. In a way, there's no time. It's not captured linearly in time, but it is captured here in the art. And for me, it is somewhat chronological, because I typically start top left and work to the bottom right of the page, which is funny. That to me is inspiring, and it's a reminder to myself about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And it's hopefully encouragement to you if you like what I'm saying. I mean, if this is something you want to hear, and it's like, okay, yeah, that is right. That's what I want to be doing. That's my motivation that I need. Yeah, I guess we'll find out. I always say that too. We'll just see where this leads, because I see how much my art keeps shifting. This page, and especially the next one that you'll get to see next week, because I am sometimes a week behind or 2 weeks behind. Well, I guess you'd say 2 weeks ahead. I've finished a page ahead of time by a little bit. And then I do my voiceover, sometimes very close to the time that the video comes out. Like today, it's just 2 days before the video comes out. But so I've completed the next page, and I can see that, that one was really letting loose in a direction that I'm going. And it's strange how there can be a consistency in that there's a consistency in the way I'm inconsistent. So as things change, it makes sense why they continue to change the direction they're changing. It becomes somewhat coherent in that. And so, I think there's a reason to have some faith in that and just keep doing it. And yes, at the same time, it is a story. I do want it to be intentional communication, crafted communication, but it takes place over years, and I cannot help right now. It takes me like a year to get the book done, so it cannot help but be a process of change for me as well. And yes, I want it to be a coherent book in the end with a coherent story. But I've got to use the qualities of what I'm doing, hopefully to its advantage. When you look at episodic, comic books and newspaper strips, the nature of it has an effect on the story and what's made in the end. And why fight that? That can become what's unique to it, what's part of it. Sometimes I think, we fight against what is reality, like what's inherent in what we're doing. Like, so why fight it? Yeah. You'll see that I chose, because this panel is pretty complex. There's a lot of characters, they're overlapping, and they're not penciled very thoroughly either. Because of that, it makes the most sense to me to do the figures first and then ink the background. I'm mostly going left to right so I don't smudge the page, but sometimes slightly I'll backtrack a bit and add someone in a background layer. So that just makes more sense in this particular panel to approach it in that way. Here we are dealing with no strong light source. None of them are the sun. None of them are primary. And there's no other flames or any other light. So the sunlight is hitting the building on the left side of this panel, to the right of these figures, up high above them, and then it's kind of bouncing around. It's going to be lighting everything that's technically in shadow here, and that's going to be reflecting on them. There's lighting from behind them as well, from an alley that's just behind them. So without a strong light source or a simple one or two light source situation, and with my pencils being so loose where I'm really drawing these people with the ink pen, you'll see that I'm just adding more and more hatching, more and more shadow until it feels a little more solid and more finished. And I'm going with shadow that's more on their left, lighting that's more on the right, but also from behind. So the shadow's kind of on the face of them. I didn't want to put it fully on the face of them because that's it hides the form quite a bit when you do that. It could hide the details on them. I want them to be clearly visible. And so a light source that's just off to the side, one way or the other, is conveys form much better, and helps you see their face, for example. And because there's not a lot of background, in a sense, the figures are filling up the page. They're going to have a high level of contrast on them. A lot of blacks and stuff. So yeah, it was kind of an interesting situation. So on the buildings, you'll see that I will provide a little hatching on the side that is the main shadow. I don't know my terminology very well with this, but the sunlight is hitting the building, and the other building is the edge of that sunlight is where the shadow starts, where this building next to it is casting the shadow. And because that's the high contrast point as well, I decided it felt right to go with hatching lines on that side by the sun, where the sunlight was hitting and the shadow starts. So that side has hatching, but not the other side. Technically the other side is also in shadow, but it's more directly lit secondarily. So this stuff is hard to talk about. You're welcome to research it, and I'm sure there's good instructionals and videos on this stuff. But it does get complicated in certain situations. And in the past, I would more carefully craft the situations so that I didn't run into this kind of situation. Because I was working in heavy blacks and whites, I wanted there to be one light source pretty much. And I had to make a hard choice on where that would be. But with my new style, that is not necessary. I can convey varying degrees of shadow and light. You'll see here I've got, just for effect, I've got their shadows casting forward, really highlighting there is a light source behind them, but technically the ground they're on is in shadow already. It's already lit from a non-primary light source. So it's by feel. And if I just cover this, I don't want to use too much hatching lines. I don't want to cover my image in it. And I'm still playing with it. You'll see from earlier pages that I was doing much less of this. And now I'm doing more, and maybe I'll just keep playing with it and decide over time, just make changes and improvements to how I do it. So far, for me, this is a very personal, process, journey. I'm not using instructional of any sort on how to do it. I just want to use what I already know, what I've already understood and conveyed in other ways. I just want to see how I can do it with this tool. I definitely do not want to go so far as to just put everything in some kind of very polished hatching, where there's, one set of, all the lines are perfectly parallel. They're going at a particular angle, but then, there's layers of it. There's each layer of shadow is coming at a different angle, perhaps creating cross hatching. Some of that, it can look very nice, but it's just too clean. It's not how I like to work. As you can see how messy I can get. I'm coming in with a brush pen to lay in some heavier black spots. So you could call that the spotting blacks. And so I'm going in and creating a more finished composition with a better balance of white and black. And there it is. You'll see that the color that I added does add quite a bit. Now you're able to see what I mean about this lighting and how I'm conveying that with the colors. And I'm not just inventing that with the colors. It is what my inks are doing as well, for the most part. I don't focus on that in this draw process series because this is about drawing, but there's definitely a relationship between the two, a dialogue between how I color and how I ink. And as I adjust how I color, I'm adjusting how I ink in relationship to that. And that is one of the great things about doing your own colors, is you're developing, you're paying attention, and you're being informed by that. You're letting your inks be informed by those colors towards a more personally expressive, personally chosen, final, image, final art, instead of handing it off to someone and being unaware, alienated from that part of it. So that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening and watching and checking out what I do. Remember, you can read all my comics on ikacomics.com. I've also got them in the Clever Kaiju website, where there's also other comics by the people in my community. See you next week.